You're listening to the Cat Breeder Sensei Says podcast. I'm April Catito, your show host, and in this episode, we'll be talking about how to design your cattery. Are you thinking about starting a cattery but unsure how to house your breeding tribe and litters of kittens? Let's break down the space requirements and some options for running your cattery. So as I go through the different areas that you will need for your cattery, and these are optimal ideas to make sure that you have adequate space and stress-free environment for your cats. Through my practice, I have seen that a minimum of 4 spaces is going to be needed even if you are brand new and just starting out. That means 4 individual and separate spaces, and we'll talk about each one of those and what they all entail. If you refer to the TICA or CFA website on cattery space requirements, you might be surprised to find the minimum requirements for space on their website is very small. I think it's somewhere around 9 cubic feet, so 3 by 3 by 3. That's a very tiny space for a cat to live in. So I don't necessarily condone the space requirements that are listed on the website, but that is the minimum requirements as required by TICA and CFA, and you can refer to their website to actually find out what those are. I will put a link to those actual space requirements on the website catbreedersensei.com. Just look in episode 3 for the link. I'll just link you directly there so you can read their requirements. So what I'm referring to in this show is going to be something a little more realistic for your cat enthusiast and someone who is running a in-home small cattery and has compassion for the cats and wants to provide the best living environment possible. There are different scenarios for setting up a cattery. We're going to be discussing using your own personal home for cattery space, and then also using separate buildings or having your own cattery and using that and start separating space out that way. We'll even go over some pros and cons to each one of those at the end. So let's talk about the stud first. Ideally, your stud needs his own living quarters. Maybe not as a kitten or when he first arrives, but as he sexually matures, he's going to need to be kept separate from the girls. You just don't want him stalking the girls all the time and trying to mate with them and even causing unwanted pregnancies, because it can literally happen in just one time. Not to mention that your boy is very likely to mark his territory by spraying. So you have to keep that in mind when you're planning out your cattery. So how much space does a male need? When you're planning out your cattery, keep in mind that intact males need a little extra space than your females do. I have 100 square feet for 2 males that share a space. They do get along and it works out well. They're very amiable. 64 square feet of that is outdoor space and 36 square feet is inside space. It's heated, cooled. That's where their food and water, beds, and litter boxes is inside. They are in a cattery, separated from the girls by a screen door and screen wall. They're still able to see and smell the females. They just can't have any physical contact with them. I like this setup. I think it keeps the stress down and the spraying down. Now, this is my theory on housing your males in a cattery where they can see and smell the females and know that they're there. One of the reasons a male may spray is to let the females know that he's there. So far, this setup has worked for me and I've had 0 instances of spraying. If you're using your personal home to house your cats, then you'll need to have a bedroom, a bathroom, part of your basement, or even part of your garage, a designated area for your boy. If you happen to get a sprayer, there are some things you can do to line the walls so that if he does spray, you can easily clean it off with enzymes and try to keep the smell down. Be sure that your male gets lots of socialization no matter where he is, along with natural light, fresh air, his own cat tree, and plenty of toys. What about your queens? Depending on the number of girls that you have, they can certainly share the space. A good rule of thumb is to have a minimum of 35 to 50 square feet of floor space per female. It's always possible when you have more than one hormonal female living in the same space. You may raise the stress level. Just monitor their behavior, make sure they're getting along, and everyone is happy and healthy. Anytime you see indicators of stress, you'll have to figure out which one needs to be removed and maybe designate a new space just for that cat. It is recommended that you have a maximum of 4 cats sharing one space. Let's say you have 6 females. In this case, you'd probably want to split up your space into 2 areas of 3 cats each to keep the stress down. And just like with your males, make sure that each cat has their own resources: food bowls, cat trees, beds, and toys. You'll need a space that's designated as a nursery. This is where the queen will birth her kittens and raise them until they are going home. This should be a private, quiet, and secluded area, separate from the rest of the colony. This space should be big enough for a birthing box, your litter training area, playroom, and make sure that this space is kitten-proofed. Once the kittens are out and about and walking around on their own, they're going to need a lot of space to run and play and pounce and learn how to be kittens. If you have more than one female, it's possible and even likely that you would have 2 litters on the ground at some point. When you're planning your nursery out, remember this fact also. Each queen and her litter of kittens should be raised in their own private space. The mixing of litters at different ages isn't a good idea for various reasons. The big kitties can cause the little ones injuries. And more importantly, we want to protect their immune systems while they're still young and not expose them to any viruses or potential bacteria that could cause them to be sick. Now we'll move to the quarantine and sick area. So the quarantine area will be used for kittens that need to be quarantined after surgeries. Any new incoming cats need to go into quarantine for a minimum of 14 days. That is the general rule. And that's done to observe their behavior, observe their health, and make sure that no infectious diseases arise in that 14-day quarantine period. Sometimes the stress of travel will trigger a virus that's in the kitten, and you won't see that for at least 7 to 10 days after the stressful event like traveling. So we always put them into quarantine for 14 days before introducing them into the cattery or the general population. That means you need a quarantine room. You need a place to put them so that they can get comfortable and get settled into their new home with their own litter box, food, toys, etc. The quarantine area can also be used for sickies. If you have a cat, whether it's a kitten or an adult that becomes contagious with an infectious disease or virus, then you want to separate them from the rest of the cats. One thing about viruses in cats is that it spreads like a wildfire. So any symptoms that you see, definitely want to remove that cat and put it in quarantine until it's not showing any signs anymore. There will be a point in your career as a pedigree cat breeder that you'll want to start keeping your own kittens and working with your own lines. You'll need some space for these kittens as well. So if you consider keeping your own, and you'll have to think about the time that is required for them to mature and replace the adult. So they need a place to grow up in your home or in your cattery until they are X amount of age, and you can put them in with the adult cats. Some breeders have space for young adults, and that's where the younger kittens are growing up and coming up behind some of the older cats that will be retiring. Where you decide to set up your cattery space is totally up to you. People can get pretty creative in converting spaces in their personal homes into cattery space, and some prefer to use separate catteries. I use a combination of both. In my cattery is my studs and my queens, and in my home is my nursery and my quarantine area. And I have my young adults in my home as well. So you can get creative and find ways to make the space work that you have. Just make sure that you're keeping the well-being of your cats in mind. The health and stress-free life of each one of your cats is really what is important. You want them to be happy and comfortable. So I have a list here of pros and cons of using your house as a cattery, and as well as building out a cattery and having a separate building. So first, some of the pros to using your personal house is that the cats get to live like pets. So they're in your house on a day-to-day basis and become part of the household. They get more socialization time because they're always around humans and living with you in your home. Some of the cons, however, of having your personal space as your cattery space as well is you have cats calling all the time. So females in heat can be very, very vocal, very loud, and to be honest, very annoying. They do it all day and all night, and some of them sound, well, like they're screaming in pain when really they're just having their estrus cycle. And they don't discriminate if you're sleeping or awake or have company or whatever's going on. So cats can be calling in your home at any given time at all hours of the night. Here's a fun fact you may not know is males and intact females can spray urine and mark their territory. Some females will do that when they're in heat, just adamantly urinate on anything they can find. So kitchen cabinets, couches, beds, floors, throw rugs, it doesn't matter to them. They're just marking their territory to send the message to the boy that they are there and they are ready. In your own personal house, you have limitations on the amount of space that can be used as a cattery. So if you ever plan on expanding or you don't have enough space available to accommodate these minimum requirements that you need to run a cattery, then using your personal home is definitely limiting on you. Before you actually start a cattery in your own home, make sure that your family members are all on board for that. Now let's talk about some of the pros and cons of having a external cattery or a separate building away from your personal home. The number one pro on my list of having a cattery is that the cats have their own space. They can howl, meow, spray, and call all night long, and it's not interrupting the smooth flow of family life that you would have inside your personal home. So they get to be cats all they want to in their own space. And quite honestly, I had to think for a long time about a con of having an external cattery. And the only thing that I could think of was the cost to build it out. So it is quite expensive to start erecting buildings and closing things in and, designing this space exclusively for cats. It's going to cost you some money. Whereas converting your personal house, it's already there. You just have to get creative and find ways to use the space that you already have, especially if you have a lot of extra space in your home that you're not using, then it's going to be easier for you to use your personal home. But that's really the only con that I could come up with is maybe the time and money required in building out this cattery if you want to have external space. There are some excellent references in cattery design in a book about feline husbandry that I absolutely love and recommend for every breeder to read. Maybe not just once, but twice, 3 times, 4 times. Just use it as a guide all the time for you. I'm always referencing this book, but you can download it for free. Just go to catbreedersensei.com and go to episode 3, Designing Your Cattery, and you'll find it in there. Whichever way you decide to design your cattery, always have the cats in mind. This will be their home during their time with you, so make it enjoyable for them, and they will, in fact, lead that to be a positive experience for you as well. The Cat Breeder Sensei Says podcast is published every Thursday with new tips, advice, and information on running a successful cattery. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and catch all of our future episodes. You can also visit us online at catbreedersensei.com. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.